Hi, my name's Bill and this is SixRounds Studio. We're back in the shop working on the 1905 Ithaca double restoration. In the last episode we glued on the appliques for replacing or replicating the side panels. Today we're going to mill them down so that they match the receiver. In order to do that, we're going to put them in the Bridgeport mill, get it all leveled up and get those panels at least brought down to the depth that I need it in order to do the final shaping and to create that panel as it might have looked when it was first installed or first put onto the stock back in 1905. Now, to get started with this, I needed to go back to the 1925 Ithaca that I've got. I'm using that as my model. Gun companies generally don't tend to make huge changes to designs or processes over years. So by looking at the 1925, even though it's a different receiver, I can get a sense of how stylistically the designers worked and how they sort of implemented those pointy panels into the design of the stock. So one of the first things I was curious about is, were those panels parallel to the receiver itself? And just using a simple straight edge, it is almost dead parallel. So I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that when we mill the applique down, if I level this this receiver out on the mill and then mill these appliques, we're going to be in the orientation that we need to be in order to do that final shaping. But curiously, one of the things that I wanted to make sure of is that the receiver itself the two sides were parallel, so that there was no taper in that. So using a set of dial calipers and just measuring front to back. So this is 1.5 inches in the back, and it's 1.5 inches in the front. They're off or different by about 5 or 10 thousandths, which that 10 thousandths doesn't really mean anything to me. So we know that those two sides of the receiver are parallel to one another, so I'll be able to use that in order to get everything the way it needs to be. If I measure the top of this, it is the same thing. It's 1.5 inches. So this basically is not only parallel front to back, but it's parallel top to bottom as well. That's a good place to be. Next thing I want to know is, well, how much should I leave the wood proud of the metal? So even in a modern shotgun and modern firearms, the manufacturers rarely mill the wood flush to the receiver. One of the problems with match fitting anything, and we've talked about this in other videos, the wood shrinks and swells over time. So if I were to match fit it, if the wood was to swell, it would be over the receiver, over the metal, which would be fine. But in the event that it were to shrink, then that wood would actually be below the receiver. And in my mind, that's not acceptable. So I would rather leave the wood a little bit proud of the metal. And that way, as it moves over the seasons, that it always remains slightly proud of the metal itself. So if we take and measure this 1925, we're looking at about 20 thousandths wood over the metal. On one side, and 15, 16 on the other side. So that's what we're going to go with. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it probably up around 35 or 40 thousandths proud. That way, once I'm done shaping the pointy parts of the panel, I'll then be able to scrape and sand it in its final finishing and then be down to that 22 thousandths proud wood at the end. All right, let's set up the mill and get this thing milled down. In several previous videos, I've mentioned that I set the mill up so that it's level to earth, so that the travel table, no matter what direction it goes, it is level to earth. Now, the advantage to that is when it comes to doing rapid setups, it makes it a lot easier to do these setups. Now, when I'm working with wood, my tolerances generally aren't as, or the requirements aren't as tight as it would be if I was machining a piece of metal down to something very, very precise. I have a lot of room to manipulate or move when I'm cutting wood. I try to be as precise as I can, but there's a lot of impreciseness about working with wood. For instance, the wood fibers don't all cut the same. I'm going to scrape this, I'm going to sand this, so the point of that is that as long as my mill is level, and as long as I level everything that is required to be level in the process, then I'm going to be where I need to be. So in the case of this, I already said that the receiver was parallel, the two sides were parallel, and that from top to bottom they were parallel as well. So just simply using the bubble level, this is a pretty nice bubble level. It's a Starrett, so it's getting me where I need to be, so that by doing it this way, by setting that bubble level, and knowing that the table itself runs parallel or horizontal or level to earth, then I'm confident that when I do the cuts on these panels, that they are going to also be parallel to the receiver as well. Now, that said, I also mentioned that we needed to leave this proud a certain amount of material. So I have a 25 thousandths shim stock, plastic. I'm going to lay that on top of the metal, because I don't want to come down and hit the metal with my mill cutter, because I don't want to damage it or ding it. So I'm going to bring that down to that piece of white 25 thousandths shim stock. Now, I can't move it at this point, so I'm going to just tap it until it just becomes loose. All right. I'll lock up the spindle, and at that point I'm going to have somewhere between 25 and 30 thousandths worth of material over that receiver. Now, if you remember, we were looking to accomplish about 15 thousandths material over the receiver when we're done. Setting it up 25-30 thousandths gives me the amount of material I need to scrape and sand when we're done. When we're done. When the panel's all shaped up. All right, let me get that phase converter started up, and we're going to mill this down to that final height above the receiver. Change of plans. That's taken over 100 thousandths material off. I don't want to do that. That's going to put too much stress on the wood, on the metal, on the clamp. So I'm going to crank that back up and begin taking small amounts, 10-15 thousandths at a time at a cut. And before I do that last pass, I'll go back in and put that shim stock. I do not want this coming loose on me. Alright, let's do that again. Put that white shim stock back in. Same process. Come down until it touches, and then just back it off until it becomes loose. Alright, now we're about 25-30 thousandths. Let's go back and cut that again. that leaves me enough to scrape and to sand, and we'll get that final fit. Once we've got the metal polished and we know what the final size of the, or final level of the metal is. Alright, same thing, we're going to do the other side. I'll bring you back when we're done. The next part of this project is to design a template that is stylistically and size-wise appropriate to this shotgun. So we're going to do that, and that'll be our next video. I'll design the template, then we'll mark it off, and then we'll begin to hand shape it. So that'll be our next video. One of the things that we've talked about this before in previous videos is that every gun, like every automobile, has a style line, a shadow line, a light line, and this shotgun is no different. And I have to use those light lines as my guide for the design and the shape of the panel. And even this older shotgun, these light lines, they follow, and every line comes down off that light line and follows into the wood. That's just good design. So on this 1905, there is a shallow light line up in this area right here. So I'm going to have to pick that up and then follow that same taper. There's a taper here. We'll follow that same taper down around, and then you have this other light line, which is right here. It is actually the bottom line of the receiver, and we'll pick that up, and then we'll try to make a real nice form or shape that sort of brings it into the point that we're looking for. But again, we want the size of that point to be appropriate or sized or proportioned correctly to its width. Now, I've got some pictures of this gun before, when I first started taking it apart. I'm going to go back and review those and see what was left of that panel originally. I'm going to go back and look at that and sort of use that also as a guide to make sure that I'm trying to follow those style lines as closely as I can to what was original to the gun. All right, so we're going to end the video right here. I just wanted you to see how I set up the mill, how I cut this, and my thought process getting it down to the level that I wanted to get. If you enjoyed the video, consider signing up for my Patreon page. The page is starting to grow. One of the problems is that YouTube will not monetize firearms videos. Even though I'm just simply doing woodworking and restoration, they won't monetize it. So consider, if you like this, if you enjoy the channel, if you enjoy the content, please consider going over the Patreon. Also, at the bottom of this video, when you click on it in the description, YouTube has now given a super thanks or a thanks, and you can consider contributing for one video. If you got value out of one video and you want to support the channel, you can do it there as well. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because YouTube cannot deny that. When the channel begins to grow, it begins to grow, and we really want to continue to see this channel become bigger and get the information out to more and more people. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ring the bell so you get notified next time I post a video. Sometimes folks are telling me they're not even seeing the videos come up. Don't be one of those. Ring that bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.